Hello and welcome back to another episode of Cloud with Chris. You're with me, Chris Reddington, and here we talk about all things cloud. And thank you for joining once again. We are now episode number 3 of Cloud Gaming Notes. We've already covered a lot of ground. We've talked about things like hosting game servers, we've talked about matchmaking, and we're going to carry on that evolution again in this episode today. So a bit of a different topic. We'll be building upon this idea of gaming as a service and thinking about this concept of your inventory and your economy, and thinking about when you play a game, what you accumulate over time, and really, again, we've said it before, this experience, right? So pleased to be joined once again by good friend, good colleague, Lee Williams. So we'll go ahead, we'll switch over the screen and bring Lee into the discussion. Hey Lee, how are you doing?
Doing good. How you doing,
All
Chris?
good, thank you, all good. And thanks again for joining. I think we've got a good few episodes going here and a good bit of discussion, so I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, of course, no worries.
So I guess you just heard in the intro there, we have obviously covered game servers. We've started talking about this gaming as a service. We kind of touched on LiveOps and DevOps before, and I think we're really going the whole hog this time and talking about Sea of Thieves, inventory economy, and probably touching on some LiveOps as well. You know, we were talking just before going live about our experiences with Sea of Thieves, so I'm sure we'll bring that into play here. So, yeah, I guess maybe it's probably worth us framing the discussion a bit when we think about inventory and economy, what we mean. So I don't know if you maybe want to talk maybe around that from an experience perspective to start off with, perhaps. I'll load up the game here.
Yeah, totally. I think we kind of were touching on this before we started the recording. I think when you look at gaming experiences, and I think experiences is the key word. They're no longer kind of instances. An experience can blend from device to device. It can be something you jump into and jump out of. There's very few actions like we used to have in previous editions of gaming where you had to save your game, and there's a lot of onus on you to keep your progress. You managed your progress. And as we look at gaming nowadays, there's a lot of inventory, a lot of my input is saved into the cloud. That experience I mentioned earlier allows me then to move between devices, whether that's the same like-for-like device, or as we're seeing in the future of game streaming, any device. You know, take my existing game progress and move that to a mobile phone, move that to a PC, and it's effortless. I haven't got to proactively remember to save that. That's something that just happens in the cloud, and when I leave the game and return, it's exactly how I left it previously. And it sounds very minor, but the actual profound impact that's having on gaming is it detracts less time from people actually managing the gameplay to actually being in the game itself.
No, absolutely. And I think, you know, something that we were talking about just before we went live here as well, right, was this idea of all of these games are experiences. And I think one of the nuanced things about something like Sea of Thieves is that it's very focused around kind of what you do in the game. Like, you know, we've just joined a game here and there's people already completing some kind of mission, defeating one of the bosses here. And when you, in this particular game, when you beat the bosses, you actually get loot of different kinds. You know, it might be gold, it might be the skulls, whatever, and you've got to go and navigate across the world. You've got to go to different places, and it could be quite a big time investment, right? So, like, I was playing the other day because I haven't played in quite a while, and the game has changed and improved since I was playing it, and that's something I'm sure we can cover as well. But it kind of struck me when we were when I was playing this game with these other people online that we'd spent probably 2 or 3 hours just traveling around the world, going and defeating all these bosses, accumulating all this stuff, and then, you know, I was able to go with this person, go back, sell it all, and get my gold and everything. If something happened in between all that, I'd be quite frustrated, right? That I've invested all this time, or even if I come back to the game and all of that gold that I kind of, you know, got there, it just disappeared. And I think that's really what we're talking about, isn't it? With this inventory and economy, this whole experience.
Yeah. Yeah, spot on. And it goes back to that point, which is people nowadays invest hours and hours, months at some point in some titles in their gameplay, and that is a huge value to them. That's an investment. That's an equity in a game that they own. And that has to be stored and maintained and kept a record or a track of. In some titles, there's that level of competitiveness. And so it's important that somebody maintains, like you say, their progress, their inventory, as that has an impact on their stature within the title. But that's part of that experience. If you kind of just left that game and walked away, that inventory is kept well, like a bank balance. You have no way of needing to manage that. You have no need to kind of save that offline or put it somewhere like on a floppy disk, like Bitcoin or something. It's just stored for you and looked after. And you can plug a different console in, go to a different device, and that inventory follows you.
No, absolutely. And I was thinking as well the other day, back to our discussion around Halo, right? And I gave a little bit of the technical discussion behind the actors framework and how everything like is an object and mapped in the world. Like just then on screen, I was holding a skull, right? Sorry, Teams is just going off in the background. I'm going to go ahead and put myself on Do Not Disturb here. So yeah, when you have these objects which are all kind of relating to each other, it gets really interesting, especially from the perspective of an economy, or inventory even. I'm holding a sword right now. I've got however many bullets that I've got. I need to go and reload and go back to that to this ammo box here, for example. All of that is really important, not just to connect to the game mechanics, but also think about that back in cloud experience as well. Because, if I get temporarily disconnected, or, if I want to join the game again with my friends or whatever, I don't want to have to kind of start the game from scratch or go back to a previous save point, right? I want to carry on and run away exactly where I left off. And I think there's also this idea there, like something you mentioned was about bank balance. And it comes back to something we said in the very first episode of this series about if you're hosting a game server, you don't want to go ahead, have to manage all of that yourself. Same with all of this inventory and all of this economy. You don't want to go ahead and do that. So it's important to kind of have that state stored somewhere. And I guess, there's lots of technologies in Azure that can do that, right? You've got things like Cosmos DB where you could probably go and store things. You've got even built services like PlayFab, for example, that offer this out of the box. So, do you see any kind of themes of what people are doing based upon the type of game, or, anything in that space that maybe you'd want to talk about at all?
Yeah, no, it's a great call. I think it depends on the person building the title. For example, managing a database, the privacy particulars around that, even if you're talking about in-game inventory, there's different jurisdictions around the world that govern privacy and people's data, which oddly your inventory is. It belongs to you. It's something that is your information. And so managing information, because obviously it's tied to your account, again, that's your private information. It just becomes quite a challenging or complex matter unless you have the talent or expertise to build that yourself. Therefore, using a cloud solution is a really good solution. Opportunity means of doing that, I should say. The governing body, the person who's managing that infrastructure for you, is adhering to all the privacy rules. And then it just comes down to how much expertise you have to actually build that database. You can buy it yourself, managed service like PlayFab, or you can build it from the ground up on Azure. I think the theme that we're looking at here is a database is a common part of pretty much every game nowadays. If it's stored in the cloud, you have to attach information about the gameplay, their progress, their inventory, etc. The input that person's made into a game back to that individual itself, and it has to have kind of a degree of identification there. And to be able to do that, again, you need a database. And I'm really struggling to think of a title that's been released as of late that doesn't have that, unless you're something like Solitaire, although probably that is a database now because it's attached to your Microsoft account. It has just become a kind of a de facto to piece, again, because you're invested so much time in a game, and equally because you want that experience to be flexible, take it wherever you want to, and equally, like you were just saying, if your console tripped out or something like that, you wouldn't want to lose any of that progress. So having it stored off-site or on a server somewhere to a gamer is part of that experience we expect.
Yeah, no, completely with you. And for anyone not watching and listening in, I'm really appreciating Lee taking a bit of time there to explain that whilst the ship gets attacked by other pirates and I can go and try and save the loot that these other people have gone and made here. So bear with me whilst I just go ahead and try and get this guy. Oh, or not. This is where I show my poor gaming skills right here. But no, everything you said there in terms of, this experience and needing this backing store, this database, and effectively connecting back, right? It's so important to just building that overall experience. And there was something interesting that you said in there actually around inventory would even be considered as part of my data, and I had never really appreciated or thought about that. But yeah, you're right. And it's not even just the inventory side of things. Like, I think you mentioned about a simple app like Solitaire, for example, in comparison to a game like Sea of Thieves, where you've got this huge open world and everything. Even then, you'd probably need some backing databases for like leaderboards, and if you're playing with friends, and how you go and interact with each other and compete against each other, assuming there's like a competitive nature. And I think that's what we're seeing, right? Is even those, I'm going to use the air quotes, but the simpler games are needing that enhancement and that enrichment. It's really interesting.
It's interesting because, and this isn't for everyone, okay, but gaming at one point in time, I had a PlayStation 1, 2, 3 at some point, and I had to buy a memory card from my local retailer. And even games like Grand Theft Auto, I'd have to go to the safe house. I'd have to save my progress. I'd have to account for the amount of time I was playing. When mum calls dinner's ready, I'm like, just going to call dinner in 15 minutes. I've got to drive to the safe house, save my game on this little memory stick. If anything happened to that memory stick, all that time I had invested in that game would have gone. Like you said, it would have really been disappointing. But it's not even just that nowadays. It's also, I just want to be able to go and play it on my phone. I want to go and be able to play it elsewhere. I also want to have, like you said, the leaderboards. It's become so competitive now. Like, my standing in online editions of games against my friends is also an incentive why I play. It's actually competitive. And that information is valuable because it's a reflection of the energy and the time, which has a value, that I put into something. And we're talking about casual gaming here. There's some gaming where it's really seen as being hugely competitive, and the amount of XP people have and credibility and status is, you could actually put a dollar value on that nowadays. Like an NFT maybe, but it's true. It's I think interesting, like you said, is the right word for it. And that has changed at a really astonishing pace.
No, I agree. And it was funny, as you were talking about experience and everything there, I did spot that the two people, the crew that I joined, have actually left. And I don't know if you spotted at the very beginning, they had a ship full of loot and just got attacked by a pirate or another crew in the world, right? And I think that's nothing to do with the game architecture from a cloud perspective. That's just unfortunately the laws of the game, right? And they've been attacked and now lost their loot. So that experience thing, I think, has caused them to to drop out, which was interesting. But no, really interesting topic there around databases and this kind of backing store, and how it really is, I forget the word that I used earlier, but it is really just up leveling, right? All of the types of games, even when we think of like the default Solitaire. And I remember those memory cards as well on like the PlayStation, whatever. And I think the interesting thing as well when we think about games these days is they are becoming a lot richer. I think I was reading an article, I think it may have been Call of Duty actually the other day, if I remember rightly, because of the size of games these days. We're kind of having to go back to that scenario where the storage size is so big, so you need almost like these expansion slots for your Xbox Series X, for example. But now what's interesting is you look at some of these companies, for example, like the folks who make Call of Duty. What they did was they looked at how they could optimize, I think, the size of the game. So I think they're also seeing the flip side, that actually we know that comes at a premium for gamers as well, and that's important because it's not just our game; it's a set of games that they'll want to go and play, and being able to optimize in that respect as well is equally as important.
Yeah, and one thing I don't think we said earlier, but there's a lot of post-sale monetization going on in games, that actual cash transactions. And we were saying about the time I invested in the game has a dollar value, the equity that I've built by playing. But actually, a lot of people nowadays are actually spending a significant sum of money in their games. And if you've put, some people put hundreds of dollars into one game, in some cases thousands. That again is like a bank balance. You want that equity to be valued. You bought equity or inventory. That needs to be tracked lawfully. I mean, you've paid for something. It needs to be kept a track of, and obviously that's in a certain style of game, but that's something that is becoming more and more prevalent, especially in terms of how people monetize games. The free-to-play titles. If you've bought that game and you've kind of invested cash, then that has to be recorded some way.
No, it's an interesting point, and it might even take us to the LiveOps piece, because something that I noticed about Sea of Thieves when I spun it up the other day was actually there's now this concept of seasons in Sea of Thieves, I think, now, that wasn't there when I last played, and there was some of this monetization that we were talking about there a moment ago, and being able to buy items, etc. I think some of that was there before, but with this kind of season idea, it's definitely more prevalent there. So maybe let's focus on Sea of Thieves again a little bit here. This idea that I don't know when you last played, but when I last played, it was probably before Christmas, I think. And, I think there's now things in there like to do with pets. There's things, for example, around different types of missions that you can now go and do, and very specific to the season that they're currently in. And all of that is possible because of something that we touched upon very slightly last time, but this whole LiveOps, DevOps kind of concept. And I think where we focused on it last time was more about the availability and the resilience of kind of the game as a service, right? But there's also this idea of where you can enhance and deliver an incredibly new experience and keep that game fresh as well. It's not just the game that you delivered on day one of release. It's now a game which is, I guess, for Sea of Thieves 2 or 3 years later, that is now effectively an even more different game. So I guess that those are probably some themes you're seeing around LiveOps, DevOps there as well.
Yeah, I think this is probably the biggest trend in my opinion. I believe this is the biggest trend in gaming, is that one time you built a game and you shipped it, and that was it. I'm talking like 5-10 years ago, even maybe even sooner. But now it has changed. I mean, the way games are being built is games as a platform as a whole. Not every game, obviously. I mean, take Windows 10. Windows 10 probably will be an operating system, no doubt, that will hang around for years and years and will have incremental updates, but sizable updates in the sense of some cases where the whole interface is updated, but the underlying platform is the same. And I think the same trend is happening on gaming. You buy into a game or platform, Minecraft, Sea of Thieves, and the developer or studio will create incremental updates based on user feedback, both direct and passive feedback. And constantly reiterate on that game, because it becomes an economy, like you said in the title of this podcast. Sea of Thieves has a monetizable value in there. There's a podcast. There's an economy in there where that will constantly evolve. And as a platform, the Sea of Thieves creates Rare. That's going to evolve over time. I mean, look at Grand Theft Auto Online. Minecraft is another great example of this, where again incremental updates are passed through to that title. And it's how you retain and engage an audience. Again, if you've invested so much time into something, those incremental updates keep you in the game because it keeps you opportunity to stretch and go further. And I mean, Grand Theft Auto has been out for gosh, how many years now? I think that is one of the best examples of that instance. And yeah, I mean, it's just the nature of the way people are playing nowadays. Again, people are really, really investing. in this content, in this
Yeah,
IP.
no, 100%. And there's some interesting nuances in there that you said that I'd want to pull out a bit as well. You mentioned about things like user feedback, for example, and contributing back to that experience. And I think what that all boils to is building this sense of community, right? It's not just about a game anymore, it's about building a community around it. Like, if we take Grand Theft Auto as an example, I read an article the other day. It may have been on Reddit, it may have been somewhere else, I can't remember. But there was this person, this gamer who played Grand Theft Auto, and he started looking at actually how Grand Theft Auto loads the online game. I don't know how they started getting into this, but anyway, the article was really interesting. I'll try and link it in the show notes if I can stumble upon it again for anyone interested. And what he did was he spoke to the developers of the game and was basically saying, I think you're actually bottlenecking when you load up the online experience here, and you can improve this by doing blah. And I think he kind of proposed some alternatives, suggested some things to him. I no idea how he figured this out, but there we go. Anyway, he obviously worked with them. And long story short, however long later, they were listening to this guy in the community, took the feedback, and actually, acted upon those suggestions, and have managed to improve the experience of that online load. I think it was the online rather than the game itself, but
Interesting.
really fascinating. And I think it comes back to that point, right, around it's not just that you're building a game necessarily anymore. Yes, you're building this service, we've said it a few times, but ultimately the real thing you're building out of that, I think, is this community, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's not for everyone, but in the most case, people are building games to monetize them. It is an income for a lot of people. And you look at the way culture has changed. This is going to sound a bit off topic, but music, Spotify, Apple Music, even my rideshare Lyft has a subscription, Prime, and so forth. The world is shifting a lot into a kind of a subscription model. I subscribe to some form of interaction or service, and it's ultimately a platform. It's essentially there to keep me sticky. The longer I'm engaged, the stickier I am to your title, the more you can monetize me, the more I've invested in your title, the harder it is for me to walk away. And fundamentally, when the biggest part of that is community, Spotify has the ability to see what my friends are listening to and friends are playing. Strava, I can see the fact that my friends are running and shaming me that I should be going out, maybe going for a cycle or something. It's community that I think is one of the biggest drivers of engagement and retention. And engagement and retention, going back to that subscription model I mentioned earlier, is what increases that lifetime value of the customer. The longer that person's playing your game, the more opportunities there are to monetize them. And the reason why you come back is because your friends are there. It solves that kind of human interaction we're looking for. And it's why you're seeing kind of multiplayer service spiking during COVID, because people are looking for that means of accessing friends and interaction. But yes, community, I think, probably is one of the biggest pieces of engagement and retention, and thus being able to monetize your title.
No, nicely said. And I can't remember where I read this, but this is just tacit knowledge now that I'm tapping into from I don't even know when. But I'm sure there's been some research done where one of the last things, if you're strapped for cash, one of the last things that you'll actually cancel are subscriptions. You'll normally look at like... run away from the the TNT. They're coming everywhere. Yeah, it's one of the last things that you'll actually go and cancel because of the fact it is so little and so often. And you look at those kind of bigger sets of funds that you would cancel first. So again, from a publisher perspective, that's actually quite a nice model for you to go and look at, because it's that predictable set of income. You know how much revenue you're going to be getting coming in because of how many monthly gamers or active users you have. You'll probably forecast, how many season passes you had over time, and you can start building out that model, right? It's it completely changes the game. Excuse the pun, but it completely changes the game of how you build and sell.
Yeah. Completely, 100%. 100%.
It's an interesting set of nuances. How I think for a lot of people who probably listen to the podcast are probably more technical background because of the type of content that I've pushed out. But actually, when you start mapping it back to the business side, I do that a lot in my day job, right? But even in the gaming side, you can do that as well, and it's something I hadn't really appreciated as a gamer, that side of it. So it's really interesting to talk about.
Well, you know what? It's another aspect as well that's kind of interesting. We were saying earlier this, the kind of the direct feedback, pardon me,
Mm,
and passive
yeah,
feedback. A lot of that passive feedback comes from another service, for example, like Azure or Azure PlayFab offer, which is the analytics, being able to really get in the nitty gritty of how your people or players are playing the game, and looking for trends and patterns where you can optimize, or like you're saying, with the load up time on one of the titles, finding areas to improve and increase, that engagement and retention and satisfaction ultimately with the title. And we know that the guys at Sea of Thieves do that. Most titles are now kind of employing that. And it's interesting being able to kind of look at data and patterns, push it back out in the game, A/B test that, seeing how some players react with some others, get the learnings, and if it's good on like a sample size, push that out to the whole game. And being able to kind of do that, which is take a sample within your game, so only a certain number of people or player population can see something, get some feedback, and if it looks good and it does what you want it to do, give it to everyone. And again, like it's imagine like 10 years ago being able to build a game, being like, yes, when I publish this game
yeah,
and it's in people's hands and they engage with it, I can see how they're playing it, improve it, test it on some other people, and then push another update to everyone to get the same experience. And like you're saying, when you go back to the business model, another interesting aspect as well, I think gaming is kind of nuanced because in a lot of cases you have to update the game to be able to reconnect
yep,
online. But if you look at the case of like mobile phone game updates and other patches and such, one of the challenges as a studio and a developer nowadays is how do you get people to adopt your update? How do you get them to download patches? Like you say, some of these patches are like 5 or 6 gigabytes, as a
yep.
minimum. And it's also then how do you incentivize people to do that? So yes, we often look at technical. We often look at the benefit of LiveOps and the kind of the back end granular level detail. But as you say, in gaming, it's really important nowadays to apply a business mindset, which is how do you market the update to your community? Do you find some really strong people in your community to advocate that? Do you publish it via app notifications? Do you have a complementary app to your console game, vice versa? And so thinking things through like that, it's great to build the technology, but you also have to ensure that you're incentivizing your community to adopt it.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And I think again, just touching on a few of those points, right? The whole aim of this series, right? Cloud gaming notes showing how cloud is influencing gaming. So much of what we
Yeah.
said there around like the monitoring, the analytics, the insights. Again, for anyone who's coming at this from the more technical side, we're not necessarily saying, hey, these servers are running at this much CPU and this much memory. It's not that kind of engagement. It's a really rich, integrated engagement into, hey, these people are all buying, I don't know, they're all buying the new emblems for their ships, for example. They're all buying these new branded weapons. They're all buying these things, for example. Maybe this is where we need our designers and our modelers to go and focus and build new content around that. And again, coming back to that community and just helping drive that experience, it's just connecting that all together. And that ultimately comes back to what, in I guess more the enterprise world, we would just talk about DevOps. This whole cycle of I'm going to develop, come back around, and then monitor that, understand what's going on, and plan that again in my next iteration. And similarities are there. I don't think there's any difference from a game perspective from what we're talking there at all.
No, I think that's spot on. One other thing I'd love to just say as well, which is, again, we often, like I say, we talk about the gaming and the technology behind it, but it's also important to understand why that technology is shifting that way. One of the trends that we're seeing in kind of the current generation of gamers is the desire for digital status. And we kind of grew up and know, hey, I didn't have a camera phone for a long time, so I
I'm
couldn't
with
share
you.
status with. But when you played and you had a leaderboard within a game, you often did a lot of couch play, or kind of when you were playing multiplayer, it was just really engaged in the titles to your friends because who was ranking the most. Nowadays, a lot of people are keen to share their digital credibility on various platforms. We upload content to Twitch, we share Instagram stories, whatever that may be nowadays, and it extends beyond gaming. and having an ability to share, so that data being recorded somewhere, that my investment, my skill level, my status, I want to be able to share that with people, because that's something that, you know, elevates my personal brand, my sitting within the community that I care about. You know, it's like keeping up with the Joneses. You know, this is a lot of way people want to share their status nowadays is through digital means. And as weird and as digressional as that sounds, it's important to be able to cater to that for your audience. If I've invested all this time, or I've got, you know, this much loot, I want to be able to tell people about that. And so making sure that that database is, you know, has all that information, but also provides me a means to share that to a platform that the friends that I care about seeing that can see, is also something to think about when you build your game as well. Because again, you know, people work hard in these games. You know, it could be like you work hard for nice things and you want to show those nice things off. Well, if you've worked really hard in a game to achieve a lot, there's a little part of us that wants to show this off to our friends. Look what I've achieved. So thinking about as well, like when you think about the economy and the community and the database or the inventory of everything you've accumulated or achieved, being able to share that, you know, intentionally or passively, you know, if somebody's kind of browsing my profile, is also equally of value to the gaming audience.
No, absolutely. And there's even something in there that was kind of nuanced that you said, and I want to pull out a bit more as well, which is I think you mentioned about kind of uploading content to Twitch and things like that, right? And you think about the indirect, the indirect entertainment, the indirect industry as a result of gaming as well. Like, I found myself at times just turning on my TV, turning on my Xbox or whatever, not actually playing a game, and just watching people go ahead and play games themselves. And not because, you know, I want to go and learn and see what they're doing or anything necessarily. It's just, it's entertainment. You know, it's just interesting watching people play. And you know, just passes by time. Like, I think Among Us is one of the biggest examples of that, right? When you look at some of the big streamers on Twitch and YouTube who play Among Us, like, they have hundreds of people watching them at any one point. And then the subscription models behind all of that come along as well. It's a huge industry from an entertainment perspective, not just the direct side of it.
Yeah, and a lot of those people are incredibly well-paid celebrities now in the gaming community.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that could even be, you know, we were talking before, right, about the different areas we might cover moving forwards. Maybe even the whole streaming side of things could be something to touch upon in a bit more depth as well, perhaps, because even streaming itself, right, you look at 10 years ago, could you have streaming like we do today? You know, could we be doing this right now? The fact that I'm playing a game while talking with you about gaming while you're halfway across the world in Seattle, right? It's lots of opportunities being opened up here, I think.
Yeah, totally. It's I don't know if you've ever seen or your listeners have ever kind of watched that episode from South Park. If you kind of Google kind of you know, the South Park episode where the younger kids are kind of watching people stream their games, and, you know, everyone's like, "What the hell are you doing? What's become of our generation?" But you know what? It's a totally valid case. You know, millions and millions of people stream and consume, spectate other people's gameplay because, like you say, it's entertainment. And again, there's huge value in, you know, the following these people achieve, their status again within the community because of their ability to play. And again, they become influential, and that gameplay, the stream to that individual is worth a lot of money. And so it continually pushes the evolution of gaming. I find myself watching other people stream games. I never thought I would, but it is really entertaining. It's not for how to, but it's just fun to watch. And I think, seeing a little bit more of that streaming market, I think, is going to really, really increase more and more, like it currently already is. I'm excited to see kind of what comes more of that.
No, agree. And obviously, I think all of this is in the backdrop of a world, right, where we've right now not been able to really connect with people. We've not really been able to socialize, etc. I think gaming has actually brought that as a bit of relief to a lot of people. I know it has for me, right? Because I don't know if I said, was it last? I think it was within last month actually that the Microsoft Ignite conference took place, and I know it's not quite gaming, but it's a tangent. We'll go there. I actually participated in Ignite using my Oculus Quest. So I was in VR,
Amazing.
with other people around, right? And I think we've touched upon it before when you think about gaming and where it could go in this kind of social aspect. VR, I think, is one of those avenues as well where you could be playing with people in game and they're kind of there. It's all
Yes,
focused on
totally.
experiences. But where I was going with that was obviously all of this is in the backdrop of COVID-19 and everything going on in the world. I think we should also, perhaps the next session that we do, and maybe I don't think we'll have one together next month. We're going to have a different guest on next month, but the one afterwards, what we can do is maybe talk a little bit around how companies and publishers have even kept going just in the face of COVID-19, right? Because a
Yeah.
lot of these people won't be in the offices, of course. They may be having distributed teams, in some cases, even across the world. How do they coordinate and keep everything going?
Yeah, yeah, totally. I think that'd be a great topic.
Awesome. Well, let me jump out of Sea of Thieves here. I won't let this person who's in my crew suffer any longer of me just wandering around here. And let me switch us back. So yeah, I think there's been quite a few interesting things that we've touched on there, right? And it all keeps coming back to this same focal point, which is this concept of experience. And I think we've even been pulling out this idea of community as a bit of a theme there as well. So maybe that's even something we can explore in the future in another episode.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah, let's see.
So I guess then, we've talked for probably half an hour or so here. Any kind of thoughts that you wanted to close with? Anything that has particularly resonated and you want to just bring back to the forefront of anyone listening in here?
Yeah, I think the one thing I would summarize is, gaming. Gaming is following a greater trend in the market. It's not too dissimilar to, a lot of other, let's call them things that are becoming platforms that people are investing a great amount of time and energy in. And so the notion of, it's great, nice to have a database or nice to have some means of kind of, having an inventory and building an economy around my game has become something that's actually required mostly nowadays. And it opens up the doors to much more, being able to move games between platforms and experiences, to improve the engagement and retention of your title, to monetize your audience more. And the challenges around the world of where that data resides nowadays. I mean, you only have to look at the news and seeing the political landscape. Just really underscores the value of having a third party to manage that for you. It's not something I'd want to do myself, but there's so many options out there now to remove the headache of all the different privacy particulars that you need to be aware of. But definitely an exciting motion seeing that becoming an integral part of, the base or the foundation of any game.
Awesome. Excellent closing thoughts, Lee. Thank you once again for joining. So we won't see you next month. We'll give you a break and we'll catch you the month after, and we'll talk, I guess, about how cloud overall has gone and helped developers and publishers actually keep going with producing games. So until then, thanks, Lee. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll catch you soon.
Thank you. You too.
There we go, folks. So another really interesting session there, all about inventory, all about economy, and then how it links back into some of those other principles and ideas that we've spoken about before. So things like LiveOps, things like DevOps, and overall this reoccurring theme of game as an experience, and starting to bring in this concept of community and how that links to the experience as well. So you know what to do. If you've gone ahead and liked this episode, please go ahead, hit the like button if you're watching on YouTube, the subscribe button, of course, and hit that notification bell so you know as soon as there are new episodes for you to go and watch. And do remember, we're not just on YouTube. It's also Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and cloudwithchris.com, where you can go ahead, listen to the episode, and watch the transcript in real time as well if you're interested. So as always, stay safe, stay healthy. We'll be back next month with some more content, and this time we'll have a different guest. We'll have another good friend, Dominic, from all the way in Australia, who'll be talking all about how he's built a social Sudoku game. So that's going to be really interesting, talking about PlayFab and how he's taken the steps to go and build that game. So lots of exciting things to come. So until next time, folks, stay safe, stay healthy, and bye for now.